Welcome to Village Youth. My name is Kara and I work with the youth at our Langley South location. We are so glad that you are able to join us today. Now, when I worked at summer camp back when I was in high school, we would play this game and we had made it up, but it was all about saving the princess. And we wanted it to be like lifelike, but a bit like an escape room. And so we decided that we would have a princess and we would put this princess in the shed and we'd literally lock the shed and then take the key and the kids would have to go and find this key. And so they decided that I would be the perfect princess for this situation. So every Tuesday, I would literally get locked in this shed for several hours at a time. And I just remember sitting there thinking like, I really hope they don't lose that key because I don't want to be locked in here forever. And my mind would start to go like I couldn't get out unless someone came. So like, what do I do if there's a fire or what if something terrible happens? So I would have this whole plan in my mind of like, I would break the window and I would use the fishing rod and I would just like start hitting at it and see if I could get out then. Because I didn't know what I would do on my own. But it was in that moment that it just highlighted like, you are all alone. And I had to figure out what I was going to do with that. Now, I want to ask you a question and I want you to turn to the people around you and discuss it. If you're online and you're not watching with anyone, you can write your answer down and feel free to share it with a trusted adult later. But here is my question for you. What do you do with your time alone? We are created for relationships and we know that. We are not created to go at it alone. Now, this is week 1 in our series called The Struggle is Relational, where we're diving into all things talking about dating, relationships, and sex. But first and foremost, we recognize that the common denominator in all of those things is like us, right? It starts with us. And so your relationship with yourself is really what defines you. It lays the foundation for any romantic relationship that can still come. And so today, we're talking about what it means to be single as a teenager. Now, here's what the Bible has to say. This is found in 1 Corinthians 7:32-35. I want you to be free from the concerns of this life. An unmarried man can spend his time doing the Lord's work and thinking about how to please him. But a married man has to think about his earthly responsibilities and how to please his wife. His interests are divided. In the same way, a woman who is no longer married or has never been married can be devoted to the Lord and holy in body and in spirit. But a married woman has to think about her earthly responsibilities and how to please her husband. I am saying this for your benefit, not to place restrictions on you. I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible. Now, many people will say to you, or maybe you've heard it said, like, singleness is a gift. And let me just pause there because I don't think anyone wants to like receive this gift for their birthday, right? Like who actually wants that? But when you think about it, it is important that we talk about it because we all do experience it at some point or another. I mean, we're born as single people. For myself, like I didn't date anyone while I was a teenager or in high school. I had lots of friends who did, but I didn't. And you know what? There was so many really great things about that. Here's what I think about when it comes to relationships. I wonder if it's a little bit like learning how to ride a bike. The process, it can hurt a lot, but the end result is something really good, something we want. A relationship where we're loved and accepted for who we are, where we thrive, a place where we're encouraged, where we find this close friend that goes with us through it all, like intimacy. But in the journey to get there, in the journey to learn, sometimes we fall off the bike. Sometimes we can stub our toe on the pedal. Sometimes we crash into a tree when we're trying to like course correct. And sometimes we can end up on the ground with total road rash and a scar that's going to take a few weeks to heal. And when we're entering into relationships, those same things can happen. We can get burned. We can make mistakes. Sometimes we maybe like waste our time in a friend group that's really not actually beneficial to us. We can get our heart broken. And with singleness, it can hurt sometimes. That process, it can be really hard to be alone while a lot of our friends are in happy relationships. Sometimes people will say dumb things to us. But if we can learn to do our singleness really well, it actually sets us up later not only for really healthy relationships, but also to be really healthy people. And so then we need to like push through this pain of being alone, the pain of learning, the pain that it comes sometimes with singleness, knowing that it produces something worthwhile. I think the thing we often forget is that singleness is typically a season, meaning a season doesn't last forever. Winter, spring, summer, fall, like you're not gonna wear your flip-flops or your boots forever. And similar, there's a good chance that your singleness won't last forever. So then what if God has something specific for you that he wants to teach you now, that he wants to do in your life now while you're single? What if there's important things for you in this season? I think we need to lean in. And maybe you're in a relationship and you're hearing this, but this is still really great for you to hear because maybe you'll be single again someday, hopefully not, but it's also good for you to help understand your single friends. 3 things I want to tell you today about singleness. First, singleness is a space where you can discover yourself for yourself. The most underrated thing sometimes in our society is just knowing who you are. In a world where you can be anything or dress any way, to know who you are and why you are made that way is such a beautiful trait that many of us take for granted and we want to gloss over. As a single person, there is this opportunity for undistracted freedom to pursue Jesus and who he has made you to be. You can take risks. You can have the time to focus on your relationship with Jesus. You can grow. You can discover without having to be someone for somebody else. You can get serious about asking hard questions and asking for help and growing in the ways that you want to. Have you ever been with a friend and argued about what or where to eat? You choose, no, you choose, no, you choose. You're trying to be considerate of someone else's needs and their desires. And when you're single, you get this opportunity to not have to be so concerned or worried about someone else's needs, and you can really focus on what you need to grow. This doesn't come in a selfish way, but in a growth-minded, focused way. I remember when I had been in a fairly long relationship with someone and then we broke up. I was so frustrated because I was back to being single and it felt like all my relationships just weren't working out how I had hoped or how I had thought they might. And lots of my friends were finding their people, and I remember just these tiny little twinges of jealousy because I was like, oh, when's it my turn? But I also was so happy for them. But it can be hard sometimes when you're on your own. And I remember as I was going through all this, a couple of things started to happen. I was in this place where I felt so broken and so many of my plans had gotten shattered. But in that, God felt closer to me than he had in a very long time. Why? Because I felt alone, I felt forgotten, I was embarrassed, I was frustrated. It was in this place and in this season of admitting that I was broken that I needed Jesus to come in and to start working and fixing up my life. I admitted that I needed him. I needed him to sort it out. And in that, he totally showed up. Now, sometimes people will say, use your singleness to prepare for your spouse. And sure, there's some merit to that. But what if it's actually use your singleness to care and to grow yourself, to better yourself, to grow in your relationship with Jesus, to serve the church and to care for others, to discover who you are and who you want to be before you try and fit that in with who God has made someone else to be. The second thing I want to tell you today is that singleness is a space that can increase the other relationships in your life. A beautiful thing about being single is that without one person you need to focus on, you have this relational capacity for other people. This is the time then where you get to invest in your relationship with your parents, to invest in your friends, to invest in your siblings. When we're single, we have more time and space to care for the people that God has put right in front of us and to build relationships with them, to get to know them. I remember when I was single in high school, and honestly, we loved it because we had so much time to just be with our friend group. And I had this big friend circle and we would do all kinds of things together. And one of those things was we had something called Waffle Wednesday. And every Wednesday we would all get together. We'd go to someone's house during a spare and we'd buy one whole box of Eggos. And then we'd take the entire box of Eggos and put the whole thing in the microwave all at once and set it for 10 minutes and try and cook them. And then we'd sit and watch these Disney movies while we sat and ate these poorly made Eggo waffles. But we had so much fun together, and those friendships have carried with me long after high school ended. And I think largely that's because we spent so much time together as just this big group of single friends. We had so much fun. In 1 Corinthians, going back to what we read earlier, it says, an unmarried man can spend his time doing the Lord's work and thinking about how to please him. Singleness gives us the time and space to invest in relationships that God wants us to love the people in front of us really well, to care for others. The third thing I want to tell you today is that singleness isn't lesser than, it's not shameful to be single, it's not something to be like rushed through. Both Jesus and Paul chose to live their whole lives as single people. Now, you're probably thinking like, Kara, that's great. Like, they chose that. I don't want to choose that. And you're right. But I want you to hear this. If Jesus and Paul were single, then being single does not make you lesser than. It does not make you unworthy. It does not mean that God doesn't have a plan for your life. He hasn't forgotten you, and it's not like God's trying to punish you for something because you're single. I love how the NLT version says that being unmarried allows you to serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible. Singleness gives us the time and the space, especially as a teenager, to serve God wholeheartedly, distraction-free. But at the end of the day, the lie that you could hear out of this sermon is like, singleness is okay, but really marriage is the goal. Or to be married is what you need. And that is not. That is an utter lie, point blank. Marriage is not the goal. Marriage won't satisfy us. Marriage also won't solve all of our problems. Marriage won't completely eliminate our loneliness, our mental health problems, our longing for relationship. The goal of a Christian life is not to just be in a relationship and then have 2 blonde kids and go on vacation to Hawaii. The goal is to know Jesus, to know him intimately. In Matthew 28, the passage where Jesus is sending out the believers, his followers, and giving them instructions on how to live a life that pleases him, he says, "Go therefore and make disciples." It does not say, like, go therefore and get married. Our ambition should be to know Jesus, to know him intimately, in our singleness, in our breakups, in our dating, in our marriage someday. If I go back to the bike analogy, if riding this bike successfully is like the idea of getting married someday, and all our cuts along the way are the things that we learn, what if it's less about like learning how to ride, and maybe it's more about the journey along that way of knowing Jesus as we go through all of these things in this process, whether we're sitting on the curb, whether we're trying to ride, whether we're failing miserably, can we, in it all, know who Christ is and know him intimately? Hey, thank you so much for tuning in today. We're so glad that you've been able to join us. We're excited to keep going through this series with you. If you're watching this at youth with your small group, we're going to take some time to discuss this further together. If you're watching this online though, I'd really encourage you to take some time, read through those questions that are posted below, and then discuss them with an adult that you trust. We love joining you today for this, and we will see you next time.